Welcome to East Meets West, episode 416. I'm Tom Merritt.
And I'm Roger Chang.
And if you're new to the show, how? How did you find us? Please tell us.
Yeah, I would love to know. I would love to know who still listens to this.
Well, we know Jason does, because whenever we mention Jason, like every other time we mention Jason, he sends us a nice email like, yep, I'm still out here. And there's a few other people. There's a couple. I always get a couple tweets, a couple Discord messages here and there from folks. So yeah, there's folks out there. But if you're new, I get that, like, we've been doing this show since 2005. So there's just going to be folks who've been hanging around back when we were promoting it, but we barely tell anyone about it now. So I'm curious how anyone would end up finding it.
Some digital archaeologists will uncover it and wonder, it's like, why did they go so long?
Was it just because they had went so long that they felt they had to keep going? Or was there a deeper purpose?
Sometimes. Oh, what a weird couple of months it's been, because I've had a number of things that I've had to manage. I've mentioned before my father-in-law passed, and then we were going through the legal probate process. So we got some of these papers back.
That's been going on for more than a year now, right?
Well, so probate takes roughly a year, 12 months or 14 months.
Yeah, okay.
You have 4 or 5 months in that period that are set aside and reserved for people with the deceased who owed outstanding debts to come and claim, like, hey, this guy owes me money, and then they have to basically sort it out.
That's when the town crier adds that as they walk through the town. Should anyone have a claim, please present yourselves. That's why I hear that when the town crier walks by my house.
So we've been getting, we finally got a lot of that paperwork back, but now we have to do a thing where we need to open a separate bank account now to take whatever funds he's owed. And so it's very complicated, and it's all very time sensitive. They say, well, you need it from like 90 days of the court issuing the thing.
Right.
But it's like a birth certificate. It's not like it gets renewed after a certain point. That's it. You know? They're not going to, like, we need at least 90 days. Like that's, so.
90 days seems like a long time though.
It's 90, but you're also dealing with a court process and a thing that takes around 12 to 14 months.
Wait, I thought you were saying you had 90 days to open a bank account.
No. I had 90 days to open an account for when they issue the document. But I got the document at the end of October, but it's stamped from the court clerk at the end of July.
Oh, I see what you're saying. So they took 90 days to give you the document, but you had 90 days from the stamping of the document. Is there, but is there one of those situations where you need the document in order to open the account, or could you have just said, like, well, I know they issued it even though I don't have it?
I have to show them the stamped one, and then.
Why is that? Why can't you just open the account and then show them the document once it shows up?
You're asking all the questions I asked. I don't know, because we talked to
that's the law.
We talked to the lady at the branch, so it might be different at the corporate level. So we got to find out. And I don't know. It's just, I will say this once more. If you plan on leaving anything more than just a couple of $100 in your pocket to whatever survivors, figure it out ahead of time, because it's so complicated.
Yeah, but the reason people don't is because they won't have to deal with it. Right? I mean, it's horrible to say, but we as humans, and don't think any of you, including myself and Roger, are exceptions to this. We are way less motivated to do something unless it affects us. Now, there are varying degrees of selfishness and varying degrees of ways of overcoming that inclination, but we all have it. We all have that. Like, if it affects us, our brains are just going to prioritize it more. So you have to work to overcome that, to make preparations.
I have a confession. I have like 4 boxes. No, actually more than 4 boxes. I have about 10 boxes in my house that I've yet to unpack from moving 6 years ago.
Yeah. Right. So you're more likely to do this for your survivors if you've had to go through it, because there's sort of you experiencing it, and you're like, well, now that I've actually experienced it, I'm less likely to want anyone I love or care for to have to go through it too, because it just affects your brain that way. But yeah, it's just that hard thing of getting people to do something that 100% won't benefit them, right? Like setting up a will and all of that, you're totally doing it for others. It will.
Well, and this is the thing. It's so complicated.
Yeah.
As my estate attorney tells me, it's like, wills are great. What's even better is a trust.
Yeah.
It's basically a legal document that orders on the cessation of someone's life. This person gets whatever specific.
Well, and that makes sense to me, right? Because if you think about it this way, I have a bank account. It's in my name. I'm the only one that can access it. That's the way it should be. That, you don't want other people to be able to access your money. I die. Now we have to figure out who gets to access it. Okay, if I have a will, that helps because we have a clear intention. Well, he wanted Roger to have it because I'm going to leave all my money to Roger. But the bank is still going to be like, let's just make sure that there's no one else who needs this money before we just give it all to Roger. Let's make sure the will is accurate. There's all these complications. Whereas a trust is basically saying, look, if I'm dead, give immediate access to this account to these people, or even better, if you trust them, these people can have access to these accounts now, in case I'm incapacitated even, or something like that. Powers of attorney and all that, so that you no longer have to. There's no longer a question, right? It's currently the bank is like, oh yeah, if Roger shows up and wants the money, we'll give it to him. We don't need a will or anything else to do that.
Oh, and this is the great thing. If you have like a bank account or a retirement account, you can directly list beneficiaries. So
yes,
spouse or kids or whatever. You don't even need a trust at that point.
Right.
They just need something that clearly states that there is. And this is the problem with wills, is what you said. It signals intent.
Right.
But it's not a legally binding contract.
It's not definitive. People can challenge a will.
Yes.
You've all seen a murder mystery.
You've seen Matlock or
yeah.
But it's funny because laziness is often a sign of like, well, the benefits don't outweigh motivating me to get out of my Barker Lounger to do it.
I think it's unfair to call that laziness. It's not laziness. It's human nature. So you have to make an effort to get past your human nature.
There's a certain connotation, a pejorative of using the word lazy. But for example, a very trivial version of this is streaming accounts. I finally canceled my HBO Max.
Yeah.
The only reason, and I actually canceled my Disney Plus. The only reason I signed up again and went through the whole process again was because I could get a $5, I think $5 or $6.
There was a motivation. Yeah.
I'm gonna save myself $72, or it's not $72. It's 66
over a
$60
year. Yeah,
for a year, and it'd be like $60. $60 is worth like the 2 minutes of my time to do this.
There's a few meals in there in $60.
It is. I will say this. It is a substantial, at least half of my grocery bill per week.
Yeah, there you go. Half of a grocery bill saved. Done.
Yeah.
Right. As you're eating half of your groceries this month, you can taste the savings.
I can
Disney
taste
Plus.
whatever stream. I watched Encanto yesterday with my youngest child. It was great. She was sort of captivated.
Did you eat anything while you were watching it?
No, I ate.
Okay.
It's hard to eat. No.
I was just going to say, if you had, then you could have said, I'm eating the savings I have made, but that allowed me to watch this.
I have a feeling that the kids are eating it.
Yeah. Well, they're eating your savings.
You know what they say?
They're always eating your
the
savings.
house and home. It's kind of true, sort of.
Until it's not. Until they leave, and then you miss them.
But the upside is I finally had some time to go through the tremendous library, not only on Google Plus, but I also signed up for Paramount Plus finally, officially, full time.
Mm-hmm.
So
you're watching all the trucks.
Yeah, because I do this. I do this every year. I'm such a cheapskate. I wait for the Black Friday deal, and then I get up for like the $2 a month, for like a limited number of months, and then it goes to the full rate, and then right before where it goes to full rate, I cancel it.
Now, that's smart if you knew you were already going to do it. But that's always the hazy question, is if there were no Black Friday. This is a what if, so there's really no definitive answer. But if there were no Black Friday and there were no sale, would you have ever signed up for Paramount Plus? Because if you were to demonstrate that the answer was no, you've actually lost money, even with the deal.
Wait, how did I lose money?
So again, this isn't unprovable. There's no way to prove this, right? But
what's the logic behind it?
But if there was no such thing as Black Friday and there were no deal on Paramount Plus, and in that world you never signed up for Paramount Plus, then you've lost money because it's the existence of the Black Friday deal that made you decide to sign up for it. And therefore, you're spending money on Paramount Plus, even at a discount that you wouldn't have spent otherwise.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
I mean, it was fine. I mean,
but but the other side of that, just to be fair to Roger, is like there's also a world where there's no Black Friday deal, and he signs up for Paramount Plus anyway because he really wants to watch the Star Trek. That's perfectly plausible. In fact, it's possible. It's probable. In which case, the Black Friday deal does save him money because he would have spent more money if there weren't the deal.
It was good. I finally got to catch up on the rest of all the remaining seasons of Lower Deck, and
Lower Decks is so good.
And I finished up Prodigy, which is good.
Well, it's not finished. It's in season right now.
Oh no, I mean in season.
But you caught up. Yeah,
I caught up.
Yeah.
And I have
that got better. I didn't love the first season. I kind of watched it almost out of obligation, out of completionism. But the second season has started to intrigue me to the point where first season and most of this season, I was letting them build up because they're only 24 minutes and then like knocking a couple out when I had absolutely nothing else or didn't want to do anything that I had to think about or pay attention to. But this past couple of weeks, I've watched them pretty quickly as soon as they came out.
It's been pretty good. I will say, like, the first 3 episodes didn't wow me.
No,
they were definitely slow.
Yeah,
but by the 5th episode, it found at least for me, it found had to hit its tempo.
I've found this to be true with these all ages genre shows like Star Wars Rebels, for example. I had the same exact thing, which is they're fine at first, but once they get going and you've gotten to know the characters and they feel like they've built up enough credibility with the younger parts of the audience that they can tell slightly more complex stories is when they get good. And that's usually in the second season. It's
like that with a lot of shows. I remember when CW did Arrow the first season, I found it to be unwatchable. Like, I just didn't care.
Mm-hmm.
It's just painful. The second season, though, and this is funny because I only watched the first half of the first season. Second season was an automatic hook. Like, it had the drama, but it also had a lot of the mystery box elements plus action.
Well, because they also, I'm not going to give any spoilers, but they changed the premise of things in the second season. Not changing the world, but a thing happens to Arrow.
Yeah.
That changes the dynamics, which just makes everything more interesting.
Yeah. They kicked it up. To borrow a phrase.
But I think that's a story development that you have to have the first season to get to. The question is, did you have to take the whole first season?
I'm trying to think of a show where the first season doesn't really have that sort
Lost.
of Lost. But
if you liked it, I mean, some people just don't like it anyway. But I know a lot of people liked Lost from the beginning
because like Star Trek: The Next Generation was sort of
very
Babylon 5. I couldn't stand the first season, but I loved second.
Game of Thrones. Again, bracketed off for people who don't like these shows anyways. It doesn't matter whether the first season's good or not. But Game of Thrones people liked from the beginning.
Well, I mean, like The Expanse was a little bit of this because I hated the first. I don't want to say I hated it. I just wasn't really interested in the first half of the first season. But the second half really picked up for me.
I can't accurately judge The Expanse because I loved the entire book series that had been published at the time already when it was published. So I was I was gonna love just seeing those characters on screen, no matter what. I thought it was good from the beginning, but yeah, your mileage may vary.
Yeah, I mean, like I've never read the book, so it was new to me, and it just didn't feel like it feels like you're sitting at a stoplight with waiting for the traffic to move, and you're like, yeah, come on, get to the.
I want to report an interesting development from the world of K-pop that informs this discussion. One of the things they've been doing for a long time with Korean groups is having like a side story, and it's usually some kind of supernatural science fiction-y story. There's a group called aespa that has a whole thing about a virtual world and avatars that they are kind of bonded with and all this stuff. There's a new group out of Japan called Team that are like from the go. They just launched. They're werewolves. Like it's in their video. It's in their lyrics. There's a whole like 10-minute film that came out with their first single, showing their story and how they're trying to save this girl from vampires. And the fun thing about it is that the vampires are another group.
Oh.
And the group had been developing themselves with a vampire story, and now they're intersecting them. I'm like, are we going to get like an extended unit, like a MCU for these backstories?
So is the whole fact that they're werewolves like a gimmick part of the band?
It's not when they perform. They're also brand new, so we haven't seen them in concert or anything. But they perform as humans when they've performed. But it's the storyline in their music video, and it's the storyline in their songs. So it's not like Kiss where they're going on stage, in costume. It's that the songs they're singing about are about this world, and then they tell that in the videos.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Are all the songs just around that?
They only have I think they might only have one song. If they have more than one song, I'm just woefully unaware. But the one song is very much, like talking about being a werewolf. And it's the thing that all these werewolf vampire stories do is it's an allegory for growing up, right? Where werewolves often used as an allegory for going through puberty because you're changing and all of that. And that's definitely there, right? It's targeted at that audience. But I kind of love this idea that they're telling genre stories on the side. I just thought, again, not trying to convince anyone and therefore you must go listen. I just thought that people might be curious to hear that.
It's very Disney in a way.
Yeah, right? Except a little darker. It's like a dark Disney. Yeah.
Because Disney does, a lot of that with the allegories. They have, what's their zombie? They have like this zombie kid, teen zombie thing between like the zombie community and just the normal community, and they have a song and dance all around it. It's like High School Musical, but
for zombies. I don't know that one.
It's really popular. They actually had like a couple of TV.
It's not iZombie, the one on CW, is it?
No, I think it's Zombies. Oh, Zombies and Cheerleaders.
Wow.
It's just called Zombies.
Nice.
Yeah.
And it's like a Disney show.
Yeah, so if you think about it, the zombies are like the I wouldn't say the poor kids, but typically in high school your social system is bifurcated between like the cool kids and then everyone else. The zombies are everyone else. And so
the masses.
Yeah, it's a very interesting way of doing it because they eat brains and all that stuff. But there isn't that horror aspect, where you find a dead, body.
So the zombies aren't something you need to be afraid of killing you.
That's part of the conceit of why they're separated from each other.
Yeah.
But they're just normal people trying to live.
Well, that's what I was. It's not so dangerous that you can't have the zombies in school.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I get it.
They made 3 movies. The third and final, Zombies 3, premiered on Disney Plus this past July.
Yeah, see, this is the kind of thing that is going to have a huge comeback in 20 years when all the children watching this grow up and start making films. They're going to be like, they're rebooting Zombies. They're going to be, and there'll be cameos from the original cast, and people like us will be like, you'll know because you have kids, but a lot of us will be like, what is that? I never saw that. Who knows anything about that?
It's interesting how cyclical, not maybe genres, but like, specific IPs get recycled. Like the classic one is actually Batman. Batman gets recycled every 10 years or so, like into something else. Or not into something else, but into a new format. Like we're rebooting or reimagining, or we're going to put him in the future.
So
like,
I think what happens, I have an explanation for this. I think what happens is you're a kid. When you're a child, you bond way more to fiction than you do as an adult. It's incredibly meaningful. And then you grow up, and some of you get into positions to make content. Most of you get in positions to consume content. You get nostalgic. You look at the originals. Now that you're an adult, realize it wasn't that great, really, but you still have the nostalgia for it. So you still love it. And the ones who are in a position to create the content decide to make it so that it is good for an adult. And they make the adult version of it. And then all of the people who are consumers go, yay, that's a great nostalgia kick. They make it, and those people's kids watch it, love it, and then 20 years later realize, well, it wasn't that good. And the reason for that is not that it was bad. It's that stories progress, technologies progress. Then they're like, well, let's make it again, but make it good. And then the cycle continues, right?
Well, it's weird. There's always this wax and wane between like, let's make it uber contemporary, and then other times it's fashionable to like, hey, let's bring it back to its roots. Let's strip away all the conceit that we've tacked on over the years. And
sometimes the reboot doesn't catch on, and the kids don't like it, and then that IP just kind of trickles away. It might come back just because the story itself is compelling, and that's when you see they're bringing back this really old story, and it's not a nostalgia play so much as just like an updating, right? So yeah,
I mean, it's fascinating because I remember growing up in the 80s, and there was kind of I don't want to say a reboot, but there was still kind of a hold of the kind of Western in popular,
right, because all of our parents had grown up in the 50s, and in the 50s the Western was dominant on television.
So you had all sorts of shows and movies. You had Silverado, but you also had different genres, right? You had the comedic take. You had Cowboy Rhapsody. You had City Slickers, which was a Western, but it was had a Billy. Not Billie Eilish, Billy Crystal, Billy Crystal.
Well, Superman, the Christopher Reeves movie, was a nostalgia play for people who had enjoyed the TV show
George Reeves, right?
With George Reeves, yeah, and yet for us, it was the first big Superman, right? That wasn't just the comics.
It was the first Superman on screen. I even remember some of the marketing materials, like, you will believe a man can fly.
Yeah.
Really kind of
and that original George Reeves show was fascinating to children, right? Because it was television. Television was new. The fact that you could even see Superman walking around and talking, that was crazy. For us, it looked old. You could see the wires. Like, it wasn't that impressive. So the Christopher Reeves one became way more impressive. Of course, now kids look at the old Superman with Christopher Reeves like, yeah, special effects aren't that great. So, you could tell when they're, at least there were practical effects.
I mean,
but
you can even spot kind of the trends.
Yeah,
like, the original Superman, or the Christopher Reeves Superman, was very much based on kind of the Silver Age comics of Superman. So it was very, I don't want to say lighthearted, but it didn't have a dark feel to it.
Yeah. Do you think the George Reeves ones were more golden age and the Christopher Reeves one were more silver age? I'm wondering if there's a parallel.
It might be, but there's bits where like he stops criminals, but he's not punching them, right? He's not throwing them around. You see him, he's effectively done a citizen's arrest and he has them. But if you move now to the Man of Steel with there you have sequences where he's just like throwing people and punching.
Henry Cavill.
Yeah, Henry Cavill. And there's that entire sequence where they fight in the city and he's demolished and
Right.
half the city. And I remember Superman 2, the character distinctly says, "Stop, you're going to hurt the people." And he flies away because he knows that if he stays and fights, he's going to like destroy the city. Well,
That's an interesting way that they actually couch stories in the current milieu of what storytelling is. The storytelling in the Golden and Silver Age was very much like the good guys win, the bad guys lose. People got tired of that and wanted more complex stories. And so the Superman now is more like, well, let's show that, you know, even Superman isn't perfect and causes damage. And
yeah, and I think it's kind of weird because they never stick with it long enough where you see kind of a character growth where they like, oh, you know, I shouldn't be doing this is because I'm going to be punching down a building, you know, where you have some growth that you can have with like a TV show or comic series, where you can just show character growth. And it's kind of weird because there was a time where at least in the comics, Batman was very, very verboten on using firearms. Even in the cartoons, it's like, I don't use guns.
yeah.
And then in the movies, like the Justice League movie, he rides around in the car with like 250 caliber machine guns popping out of his hood of his car. It's just like a weird.
He didn't use the guns; the car did.
It's just really there is very much. I see in it, and I understand what's happening. Is like when you grew up in the '80s, you're all about like action sequence, action, and when you're a movie maker, it's like, how do I get more action sequences? What other kind of action sequences can I do?
There's also the development of the medium as well. People were afraid of television. Like we sort of forget that people thought television was damaging to children. People thought comic books were damaging to children even before that. And so they would be very careful about the stories they told, not to give firepower to those who were stoking fear about it. These days, that debate is less. You know, there's still a debate about what stuff is good or bad for children, but it's not the medium itself that people are afraid of. So you can say like, well, we're telling the story for adults, you know, and people accept that, which they didn't do that in the early days. Like every story had to be, you know, acceptable for children because comics were for children, and because there's no way to stop a child from watching television if it's on. And so I think, you know, we've been through that with video games, where video games are finally getting more complex stories over the past 10, 20 years because we've sort of loosened up about like, okay, video games aren't just for children. You can have video games for adults.
It's going to be very interesting to see how old and dated, because The Last of Us is coming out. That's based on a Sony PlayStation video game. And what's so fascinating is that like we're at the point where video games or where comic books were in the late 90s, where up until then they were treated as they were treated as sort of exaggerations of everything. And then around the 2000s, you had like, well, comic book based movies are now sort of a standard, right? They're not just your peripheral thing that you do. I still remember in the 80s, to do a comic movie, people used to put like word boxes and all the other kind of tropes.
Oh, right, yeah.
They put the scene in the cell and they would move.
Superman was kind of an outlier back then in that it didn't do all of those tropes. And like, who's gonna go see a comic book movie except for kids?
And then they would like do all these things, and it's like, yeah, I get it. It's based on the comic book, but you don't necessarily have to do that.
Pow.
But like when video game movies started, like in the 80s, it was all about not an actual video game, but it was a concept, and so it was centered around an arcade machine or your computer.
Oh, like Tron
TV,
and stuff.
Tron and stuff. And then you moved up to things where they did Doom, and it's like, how do we recreate the feel of Doom? And so they do the shot where you have the gun.
Because video game movies before that were movies about people who played video games.
Exactly.
Not a movie telling the story from a video game, because video games like didn't have story. I remember talking about a Pitfall Harry movie in the early days and going like, yeah, but what do? He just jumps over ponds. What's the movie going to be about?
That's the thing is like, they would try to integrate a sequence where the guy's swinging on a rope, jumping over things. And they did that for the longest time. And someone said, hey, wait a minute. These games are sophisticated enough that the stories...
Eventually, the games got sophisticated enough, like Last of Us, right? Where it's almost entirely story.
Yeah. And if you play the game, you realize it. I mean, it's actually very well written. in a way, the game is very on rails.
Yeah.
In that you can't really change the plot, but you go and play through key plot points that bring you to the next.
You experience the story in a way in a more immersive way than just reading or watching a movie.
But once the metaverse takes off, it's gonna be very interesting because then you can blend the two in a way where I mean, video games already do that, but you still feel that you're playing a game.
I'm not gonna lie, I wouldn't be shocked if movies become more like books, where it's a choice that people make to enjoy the experience because they enjoy that flavor. It's almost a nostalgia play, maybe even more along the lines of listening to music on vinyl, because the mass movie experience will be immersive. It'll be like, well, why would you see that story as a movie instead of getting the full experience in the immersiveness? And the movie becomes a style choice. And I bet the way we'd like, oh, should you read the book or see the movie first? There's should you see the movie or experience the immersive environment, whatever it's called?
I mean, I definitely think that's where we're headed. And I find it interesting that that we'll be in a phase where the movie going experience is kind of like this very not very elaborate, but very kind of like high level of fidelity, sound and video will become more commonplace in the home, in people's homes, where that doesn't hold appeal. But if you do like an event where everyone, like what they used to do in San Francisco, where they had movies in the park and you would have like a bunch of people, you would have that kind of, I don't want to say Rocky Horror, picture show where, people are singing along, but I can totally see that where people are just talking back, or they're, there's
the way to go with it is not to compare it to anything we have now. It's to notice that get mass gathering where you have a place where people come to do a thing like watch a movie always relies on the fact that the economy of scale lets you give people an experience that they can't afford to get at home for a cheap price, right? So if we charge everybody $10 a ticket, they can all watch a massive screen with huge speakers that they would never be able to fit into their own house unless they're the richest people on earth. And so in the future, like, you're right, the price of massive speakers and big screens is going down to the point that the difference is not as much as it used to be. So there'll be, what can you do in an immersive environment to provide people a safe and enjoyable way that they couldn't do at home? And I think you're onto something. Like interaction amongst the audience in that is certainly a part of it, because you're not going to organize 100 people to come to your house to get an immersive experience, but there could be a place that does that for sure.
I mean, like when you go to a ball game, there's a specific feeling you get.
There's a difference between watching it on TV and being in the park. Yeah, absolutely. All right, so you weren't imagining it, everyone. The East Meets West theme began to play earlier. I don't know why. I may have bumped it with my hand without realizing it, or it may be a ghost, but I'm now intentionally playing it. Subrilliant.com/EMW is, of course, the place where these episodes are hosted. And that's it for us. We'll talk to you next time.
See you next time. Bye.
Bye.